Hi everybody, I'm Barry with the final talk of 2024, which is good. Actually, first of all, I want to shout out to Ryan because I realised while we were talking there, I've actually got outside with a little widget on my phone, doing my countdown to my holiday in 40 days and 13 hours time. I will be in Fiji. I'll be leaving for Fiji then. Good up. But I've only got 2 events. I think probably because I'm just don't do very much. I should put CocoaHeads in there. So, yeah, going to talk about CarPlay. You've used CarPlay probably, but you probably haven't written an app for it. So let's go through that. First of all, a little overview about what CarPlay is. CarPlay lets you access many parts, but not all parts of apps. So in messages, for example, someone sends you a photo, CarPlay will say something like, Rob said, this is the place, and sent a photo, but it won't actually show you the photo. It could show you the photo, it can draw images on screen, but that might distract you when you're driving, so it doesn't do it, which is fair enough. All the logic for CarPlay apps runs on the phone, so it's essentially a second screen for your app, is the way to think about it. But you don't really know what that screen is going to look like. Sometimes you might have a big touch screen, it's just essentially like an iPad size screen. Sometimes you get small screens, sometimes you get rectangles, sometimes you get squares, sometimes you get squares inside circles, which that's, Fletch is familiar with this one. That's actually against Apple's guidelines because they say you shouldn't have car UI on the screen at the same time as CarPlay or on the same screen. But I think minis get an exception for lots of things, which is fair enough. All of that is essentially irrelevant to you as a developer. Like you're just dealing with a rectangle. You don't really care about the screen, except some screens you can't touch, some you can. Some screens you can't scroll, like you can. They don't accept the scroll gesture. Some do. So essentially, you can't really make any hardware assumptions. Next generation CarPlay was announced a couple of years ago, I think. It was supposed to be out in 2024. There's no signs of any vehicles coming out with it yet, but hopefully soon. There's a really good design talk from WWDC this year. The design language of next generation CarPlay, it's really nice. Like it's a gorgeous looking thing. We'll have to see how it works for real, but it's really cool, and it'll be interesting to see how that works with existing apps and how you can make your app work with both at the same time. Is it going to use the same frameworks? We don't know yet. So now we know the landscape about CarPlay, we can start to build. That animate? Yeah. We can start to build for it, but actually we can't. CarPlay is a bit different to other things. You can't just knock it up and start trialing it within 5 minutes, because you've got to apply to Apple for special permissions to get a particular entitlement added to your Apple account to allow CarPlay to work at all. And you've got to apply for a specific bundle ID and a specific type of entitlement. And when Apple respond, that could take a couple of weeks because it's a manual process you got to go through, and you got to add that provisioning profile to your app. You got to create a provisioning profile, and then you got to add it to your entitlements. So you got to add that thing there, com.apple.developer.carplay driving task. It gives you the XML to do these things in the documentation. You don't have to fiddle about with it. But notice that says CarPlay driving task. What's that all about? Before you even make the request to Apple to get that entitlement, you've got to know exactly what you're asking for. And there's various different types of apps or types of CarPlay entitlements that you're allowed to ask for. Audio, communications, driving task, charging, fueling, maps, parking, quick ordering. That's it. If your app doesn't do one of those things, you can't have it on CarPlay. Just not allowed. Like, you can't have games on there. Some of those are really obvious what they are, like Spotify for audio, WhatsApp for communications, Google Maps, like Wilson Parking have a parking app, stuff like that. So they're usually pretty obvious what you're asking for. This is just a slide to shout out Zach from Sydney CocoaHeads, because he made a fueling app, which has got a really nice CarPlay implementation. Not if you're in Victoria, because the Victorian government hasn't mandated that fuel prices have to be published through an API. Everyone else has. So they get the nice things and we don't. It's not Zach's fault, it's the Victorian government's fault. So don't blame Zach for that. And I also like that Zach used a street that I used to live on in his marketing screenshots in Woolloomooloo. So that's quite cool. And one thing to know about this is it's got a tab bar at the top. So just remember that. We'll come back to that in a minute. In the case of what I was building, I wasn't entirely sure if we were going to be building a driving task app or a navigation app or a parking app. It was fairly obvious, but we could have made a case for some of those. So we'll zoom out a little bit to see why we ended up with a driving task app. So this is our use case. I work for a company called HDS, who do deliveries, usually chilled deliveries. So if you've ordered a box of those sort of prepared meals, pretty decent chance that we delivered those to your house. Hopefully it was on time. So there's a lot of delivery trucks and vans flying around. Therefore CarPlay could be useful for those. I'm not sure what percentage of the trucks and vans actually have CarPlay capable systems, but you can also buy aftermarket CarPlay systems that you can stick on your dashboard for about $100, I think, a couple $100. So here's an example of what we do to give you a context of the app. This is our web dashboard. You can't really see it too well there, but that's like a typical run. It's got 76 deliveries, or drops we call them. That covers about 8 hours of a driver's time. In the old days, drivers would just do that with bits of paper, and they go around with their mailways and a sense of adventure and figure out where they were going. Now they have phones, so we can give them much more data. We can get real-time tracking, and they can scan barcodes, they can take photographs. There's lots of stuff that they do in the app, and that's mostly what I work on. So this is some of the app screenshots. Yeah, they do a bunch of stuff in the app, but we don't need all of that for CarPlay. We want to squish down the requirements of CarPlay to basically, here's where you're going, and here's what to expect when you get there, which is an address and maybe some notes about where you're going. Ooh, squishy. So to go back to these templates again, let's say you've got to decide which type of app you're building. Oh, sorry, I haven't mentioned templates yet. CarPlay uses templates, and you've only got certain templates available to certain types of apps. So there's some common ones that are available to all apps, but if you want to use the map template, you can only do that with a navigation app. No other type of app can use the map template. And conversely, if you want to use your point of interest template, a map or a navigation app can't use that template. So you've kind of got to look at this and figure out what templates do I need to use, and therefore what kind of app am I actually building. And it gets even more complicated, because if you try and use a template in an app where you don't have the entitlement for that, it just crashes. I tried that, it just crashes out. So CarPlay is one of those things where you really got to read the docs before you start building to know what you're getting into, which is kind of annoying. And you need to do live testing, because things could crash. Even more restrictions. Driving task apps are restricted to using 2 templates in total in the hierarchy. So remember earlier when I pointed out that Zach's Petty app has a tab bar. Our app can't have a tab bar because it's a point of interest plus a tab bar, plus like an information screen. That'd be 3 templates in your hierarchy, and it would just crash. In our case, that's actually fine. All we need is a point of interest. That does everything we need. But for some apps, that could be a real pain. Or for some sort of ambitions of what you might want to do with your app, that could be a real pain. So we know we're building a driving task app. We know now what templates are available to us. So let's build it. There isn't that much to CarPlay. That screenshot there, that image, shows every class that's available in CarPlay. There's about 3 dozen of them, and you probably won't use more than half in your app, no matter what you're building. So you can learn all about CarPlay pretty easily, and actually a lot of these are really similar. It's the same thing over and over again. So there's not a lot to it, which is quite good. Gives you, a small set of parameters to work in. So we'll get started. First of all, this is the coding bit. First of all, in your info P list, you've got to provide a delegate which is going to be used for when the CarPlay screen connects to your phone. This delegate will get called. Again, documentation gives you the XML that you want to use to set all this up. You don't have to fiddle manually with it. In our case, we got the CarPlay scene delegate. Is that what they called it? Yeah, CarPlay scene delegate. So we will set that up next. That connects to template application scene did connect. Gets called as soon as a CarPlay screen connects to your app, which either is because your app is open and you plug in or wirelessly connect to CarPlay, or when you tap the icon for your app in CarPlay to launch it. That's essentially the same as the application did finish launching with options that you get in an iOS app. It gives us 2 things, a template application scene and an interface controller. We store those in variables because we'll use those later. In the real app, I do a couple of other things here. I set up a service to vend data into this class, and I set up a timer to refresh that data every couple of minutes, but we don't need to worry about those. And on the previous screen, we had a set up interface function, and that's where we set up our interface, funnily enough. Notice that this is a function that's an extension of the CarPlay scene delegate. You might think architecturally you want to do this in a dependency or do it in a separate module or that sort of thing. Honestly, there's so little code involved in this, it's probably not even worth it. And also most of the logic is going to be held in the service that's providing data to this app. So you can test that as a separate thing. The UI part of it is so simple that I just kept it all in one file, and it's not that much code. So I would just leave it as an extension on that delegate. Architectural people will be like, oh, don't do that. But it's fine, it works. So that's how we create the template, and we use the interface controller that we previously stored in the variable to set that root template, and then that will then be used if that template does any events, like you tap a button or whatever, the change of screen would be done using that interface controller that you pass, that's saved in this extension. So next up, if you remember that our app deals with runs that the driver has and then deliveries within that run. So we need to check first of all that the driver actually has a run to use. They might not. So in our create template, it returns a CP template, which is an abstract class for all CarPlay templates. In this case, we're going to return, first of all, an empty state template, which here is a CP information template. That's actually one of the more sort of flexible templates that you get within CarPlay. It has quite a few things you can do with it. You can provide a bunch of items, which it will show in a list. You can provide actions, which is like essentially buttons. You know, you can have like a refresh button or whatever. We don't. In this case, it's more just like a blank screen saying you don't have any information to show. But it's a good example of a common pattern that you see in all the templates. You have a title, and then you have some stuff in that, like an array of stuff, and then some actions. Pretty much all the templates look very similar to that. So that's the empty state. This is the point of interest state if you have data. Point of interest template is, I don't like the naming of this because it should be point of interests template, I think, because it's an array of multiple points of interest. But anyway, it's called point of interest template. And this is the same pattern again. It's a title and then an array of things. And in this case, the array of things is an individual point of interest. And they look like this. Again, it's got a title, it's got a subtitle, blah, blah. Point of interests have a location. They have to have coordinates because they're going on a map. And essentially what we do is create an array of a bunch of points of interest and give them all the data that's all vended from our data service. I think we put maximum 4 of these on screen, which I'll come back to later. And that's it. That's basically the data that we're going to stick onto the app. We're going to have a list of, here's the next 4 deliveries that you're going to be doing. One more thing we need to do though is to add user interaction. Adding a button is a little bit different. The previous slide was a little bit oversimplified because actually what we do is we create the point of interest and then you add a button to that as a CP text button. I don't think there's other kinds of buttons. Maybe? No, I don't think there is. I don't think you can have like image buttons or anything like that. And that's done as a sort of a callback. So in our case, the button is a directions button that takes you out to Apple Maps or Google Maps or Waze. So that again calls out to those other apps, passes them the address that you're going to, and then you can navigate to the address with your preferred navigation tool. And that's really the reason why this app is not a navigation app, because it's not doing the navigation for you. It's passing off the navigation to another app. And that's basically how you build everything in CarPlay. It's a bunch of templates, you stack them together, essentially in the same way as you do Swift UI views. You're composing things from smaller things, and when the data changes, tear it all down and rebuild it. So what didn't I show you? I didn't cover very much CarPlay there. We didn't use some stuff in this app, but essentially all the other things are created in the same way. UI navigation is done essentially in the same way that the button happens there, except you tell it to go to a different template rather than tell it to do some action and jump out to a different app. Navigation on the road is a bit different. If you have a navigation app, you can tell CarPlay that something's happening, like right turn in 400 meters. And even if you're in a completely different app on your CarPlay screen, like you're in a music app or whatever, it'll pop a little modal above your music app to give you those directions. That's kind of like complications, I suppose. So you can call out to do stuff like that in specific circumstances, but they're really locked down. And there's some other templates like grids as well, which is things like in the music app where you get your grid of album covers, which I think is pretty much the only place that you can do images within CarPlay. Other things you can't do. Templates are pretty restrictive. There's a lot that's not available to you, much to the annoyance of designers. Pretty much everything just takes a string. You can't format it in any way, you can't make it can't change the font, can't change the color, you can't add images to it or SF symbols. Yeah, you're like Sideshow Bob. You're just getting thwarted at every turn, which is actually, I think, a good thing. Like, you don't want to have drivers seeing something on the screen and being like, oh, what does that icon mean? Or, you know, what's this image here? Keep it really generic across all apps. I think that's best for drivers. Be interesting to see if that gets loosened up a little bit with the next gen CarPlay. So how does it look? This is the end result. We have points of interest in a list, and they also get mapped onto the map behind. One place where there is custom code is those pins on the map. That's custom drawing to put a number inside a circle, so that number matches to the number of the drop in the list. You can see there that some text is clipped. So again, you don't get any control over that. Just clips the text. You can't squish the font size down a little bit or anything. But when you tap on one of those list items, you get the full text. And this is, I'm not going to say this is scrollable because I haven't tested that. Hopefully that'll be scrollable, but maybe not. Maybe it will just clip at the bottom. And there's the directions button that we added. So yeah, is that it? Doesn't seem like very much. Actually, that's all the drivers need. And also remember this thing where we're limited to 2 levels of navigation. So there's actually not that much we can do, even if we wanted to. So you built your app. Next up, you got to test it. There's 2 ways you can test it, and both of them are hilariously broken. Like, I don't think Apple has touched any of this stuff for, I don't know, years. I think iOS 12 maybe was when CarPlay came out, or the new templating version of CarPlay came out. And I don't think they've touched any of this stuff since then. First of all, you can run it in the simulator, or when you're running your app in the simulator, you can add an external display, which is a CarPlay display. That will give you some options, basically the same as you get if you attach any other display in the simulator. Like if you've got an iPad app and you're testing with a second screen, it's the same thing. These don't work. Don't bother. Knob doesn't work at all. If you change the dimensions, you get what's at the bottom there. So you get a larger screen, but it just puts black bars around an 800 by 600. The top there is an 800 by 600 on a MacBook screen. It's tiny, but it's okay. You can stretch it and play with it. It's fine. But what you can't do in the simulator is any location stuff, Siri stuff, seeing how it reacts with other apps, stuff like that. So it's okay for like proofing your UI, but that's about it. There is also a CarPlay Simulator, which is a separate tool that you get in the additional tools for Xcode package that you can download. What that does is actually connects to your actual phone. Your phone has to be connected wired to your laptop, so you got to plug it in. But if you do that, the CarPlay Simulator looks like this and is essentially exactly what happens if you plug your phone into your car for real. And this one does work, like the knob on this one works. If you go up and down, it'll navigate around, which is very similar to how Apple TV works. And the good thing about this is you can, because it's running on your phone, you can test it with location services, with like a podcast running in the background and stuff like that. So you can mess around with the sort of constraints that are on any phone. One thing to note on here, which is kind of what I was mentioning right at the start about different capabilities of different devices. See those up and down buttons at the bottom there? So some cars, if the car can't scroll, like if it doesn't have a gesture to scroll, it'll put buttons on screen for you. you have no control over that. You just draw your list, and if it appears as buttons, it appears as buttons. So that's quite a good way to test. The best way to test, really, you've just got to get in your car and test in your car. Like my car. There we go, and it works. Obviously your car isn't usually in the office with you though, so you got to do that a little bit later. And that's it. Any questions?
I have several questions, but I'll start with the obvious one. Was this entire project just a way to get your company to buy you a test device?
They didn't buy my car. No.
Right.
But now that I think about it,
Yeah.
is it a tax?
You
Is
need
it a tax write-off
ones
though?
to
If
be
we've
able
used it
to,
for?
yeah. Need a few.
Yeah.
Right, more serious question. The email to Apple to get the entitlement, how much detail do you have to go into? Like, do you have to basically write a business case and get them to agree to it, or?
Have to defer to Fletch for that one because he did the email.
I'll pass the microphone.
It was a website link that opened an email, and I sent an email, and about 8 weeks later, I still had no response. So I poked. Who's his TC? TC didn't respond, but someone else responded about 2 weeks later.
So TC responded.
So there is no process.
Yeah. So you're not like quickly spinning this up. You're not going to do it
But it
tomorrow.
also sounds like you're not having to pitch Apple your idea and get them to agree that it's legitimate first.
No one challenged me.
Yeah, which could be tricky if you've just, like if your app is, like you haven't really written much yet, like if you've got just a skeleton,
Yeah.
you might not have much to go on to prove that, yes,
Yeah, if you wanted to
essentially
prove
just an
out a
idea.
concept or something, who knows?
Were there any other questions in the room? Yep.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Baz. I've probably got a business question as well, though. Like, I had no idea it was so restrictive. And I guess from a business point of view, like, I'm wondering what the reasoning was for developing this, like, as opposed to like a car mount kind of thing where you stick your phone on the dashboard. Is it for, safety, insurance, all that kind of thing?
I can help there. Safety was one. Some of the enterprises that we're talking to about delivery, some of them actually stipulated that they didn't want drivers touching a phone while doing services. So this ticked that box.
Yeah.
As well as it's a cool gadget for marketing.
Yeah, it's good for marketing. And also it was, apart from the time lag to get approval for it, it's a pretty easy thing to spin up. You can proof it up. Took a day, I think, to just get a basic version up and running. So you can give it a try fairly easily and see, like, is this going to be useful to people? I should have looked to see if it was being used by people. Oh well.
Question okay?
Would it work if you had like a third-party CarPlay device on your desk?
Yeah, should do. Yeah. I think the aftermarket CarPlay units, yeah, as long as you can power it up and it connects Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and whatever, it should be able to. Yeah.
2 questions online. Are there any special accessibility bits for CarPlay?
Nothing.
No
No,
accessibility.
I haven't seen anything about that at all.
Just the Siri integration then. And that's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
Worried blind drivers.
That's a fair point. And do you have any comments, etc., on unit testing for CarPlay?
Yeah, like I said, the UI stuff is so simple that you shouldn't really need to test it. But you could back it with a view model to say what am I going to show, and obviously you can test that the same as any other code. So yeah, I would probably test it just that one layer deeper. I didn't write any tests for this. But, yeah.
You don't write tests at HTS, don't need that.
You do.
Yeah, we do.
Are there any restrictions on what you can do on the iPhone when CarPlay is active?
Yeah, that's a good one actually. The guidelines say you're not allowed to put anything on your CarPlay app to tell the driver to go and do something on the phone. So you can't put something on the screen that says this feature is not available. Open the app on your phone to
Waze does
do
that all
this.
the time.
Does it?
Yes.
You're not allowed to.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe the reviewers
Reviewers are definitely
sit there with
installing CarPlay
CarPlay
apps and testing them.
screens doing it. Yeah, so you're not supposed to do that. But yeah, it's actually one of the things that kind of surprises me that Apple doesn't lock out your phone when it's connected to CarPlay. I could probably see why, but true.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, there's guidelines about that. There is a document, a CarPlay like developer's guide, which is what those screenshots were from, and it goes into quite a bit of depth about those kinds of things that you should and shouldn't do, kind of like appendices to the App Store guidelines, I suppose. But yeah, how well those are enforced, don't know.
Any more questions in the room? I'll go another one then. I assume it's just included as part of your normal App Store bundle, so there's no separate distribution you need to worry about.
No, yeah, it's just part of the app. Yeah.
But your very first slide where you set the root template has error handling involved. What kind of errors do you get back from that? Or just in general, error handling on CarPlay, given it's a separate screen with a whole separate system?
Yeah, I haven't seen any errors. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it could disconnect. Like my CarPlay, my wireless CarPlay, very often disconnects the phone from the car in the McDonald's drive-thru. I know there must be a lot of like noise, like signals flying around in there, and lots of cars close together, I suppose. So it very often disconnects there. So I guess you could have things where it's disconnecting, connecting. It's not really an error, but things to react to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what errors you get. Actually, I just log them when I get them, and then never look at the logs.
Never leave the device.
Should do that as well.
Yeah. So it says, is the documentation for this public, or do you need to get past the entitlement bit first?
No, that's public.
Public?
Yeah, you can get that. There's a CarPlay, it's like developer.apple.com/CarPlay, I think, and it's on there. Yeah, it's just like one PDF document that's like, I don't know, 30 pages or something.